Welcome back to another episode of A Journey Through Cinema, where we take a look back at each year in film, best movies, highest grossing films, award seasons, and notable cinematic achievements. The year is 1917. We are now entering the very earliest days of classical Hollywood and the rise of American cinema to dominate the global market. World War I was still in full swing, causing most of European cinema to grind to a halt, preventing screenings within the war-torn countries. But across the ocean, the United States continued to build on their flourishing industry in Hollywood and in New York City, embracing feature film production and continuing to advance technology. Thomas Edison, under his motion pictures patent company, still held a monopoly on many areas of film production and development. His brutal iron hold on many patents caused the studios to flee across the entire country to Los Angeles, where it would be way harder for him to enforce these patents from a New Jersey area of operation. It was in sunny California that this artistic pilgrimage would find sunny blue skies and ideal weather that wouldn't interfere with film scheduling, as well as a wide variety of terrain for different movie settings. This was a movie-making paradise, and it would transform the quaint neighborhood into the cinematic hub of the United States and even the world. Studios flourished and popped up like weeds, and by 1917, Hollywood had been vertically integrated to be able to handle films from manufacturing all the way to production to distribution. This year in 1917, the first African-American studio, Lincoln Motion Picture Company, was relocated from Nebraska to LA. We are only 52 years out from the Civil War, and the U.S. remained an extremely racially divided country. The Lincoln Motion Picture Company would create the first race films, as they were called at the time, which is really just a less ideal way of saying the movie was made for a black audience. The Lincoln Motion Picture Company had the goal of trying to bring more black actors and actresses to the screen in less offensive and stereotypical roles. These films would only play to African American audiences, mostly relegated to churches, schools, and a few, as they were called then, colored-only theaters. Due to a lack of screening venues, the studio would be shut down in 1921, but remembered for its role in furthering early ethnic diversity. Also this year, Max Fleischer would invent rotoscope animation, a technique of back-projecting live-action footage onto a flat surface and tracing over them. This technology would be used in further animation and help develop future traditional cel-shaded techniques. It would also be the first step in creating composite mats for live-action visual effects. And it's still a style of animation seen today, most famously in Ralph Bakshi's productions such as the animated Lord of the Rings. On April 9th, the Supreme Court would end the Motion Pictures Patent Company's monopoly on the market in a decisive case against Universal. It would become an early example of the patents misuse doctrine. It would keep patents articles from restricting or controlling materials for further production. This is maybe an oversimplification, but the basics, at least from, a novice such as myself. I'm not exactly a lawyer. But the end result was that it would break Edison's hold on the industry and give Hollywood the space it needed for more aggressive expansion. On April 23rd, legendary actor and stuntman Buster Keaton would star in his first film as a supporting character in Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle's short film, The Butcher Boy. Arbuckle would instantly recognize Keaton's talents and befriend him. They would star in 14 films together through 1920, with Keaton directing his first film, Rough House, later in 1917. Ending out the month on April 25th, the influential early studio First National Picture was founded. September 3rd, The Gulf Between became the first two-color Technicolor film. It's important to note that this does not make it the first color film. Kinemacolor was the first successful color process back in 1908, with their first screen film, A Visit to the Seaside, and it being used most famously in the documentary With Our King and Queen Through India. But this was Technicolor's first step towards the eventual three-color Technicolor process, which in about 3 to 4 decades would come to dominate the industry. September 9th, Harold Lloyd introduced his famous glasses character in Over the Fence. On November 9th, Argentina released the first ever feature-length animated film, El Apostol. The film is unfortunately lost to time, but utilized very early cutout animation techniques to depict a political satire on the current president. The lack of presentation for this film may be down to the criticism of the government and its neutral stance in World War I. Director Quirino Cristiani, I hope that's right, I'm terrible with names, you guys are probably figuring this out. Anyways, his other two films, Peloponnese and Leaving Without a Trace, would, perhaps prophetically, also vanish without a trace. In even worse political news, on December 18th, Universum Film AG would be founded in Berlin as a propaganda machine. It would one day be used as a tool for the Nazis to solidify their power, a precursor to terrible things to come. Moving into the highest grossing film, It was kind of hard this year to lock it down. Again, box office tracking isn't very reliable in the 1910s. This year had 4 possible contenders: the now lost epic Cleopatra, and then 3 movies starring Mary Pickford: Rebecca of Sunnybrook Farms, Poor Little Rich Girl, and Romance in the Redwoods. We took a look back at Pickford's great year in 1917 in a previous video, so feel free to go check that one out. All these movies are likely contenders as the highest grossing film, although I wasn't able to get anything close to an exact number on how much they made or really sort out which of them is the biggest one. For awards, we are still in the early days, and the Academy Awards, or really, any kind of festivals, are still a ways out. Some honorable mentions would be The Dying Swan from Yevgeny Bauer, about a deaf ballerina who, after her boyfriend leaves her, falls in with a man obsessed with death and her play. I'd also recommend A Man There Was from legendary silent director Victor Hulstrom, about a sailor who takes up an adopted family but loses them in a war and his own long imprisonment. Upon his return, he must decide whether to take revenge on the man he holds responsible. It's a solid tragedy. I'd also recommend checking out a movie from each of the big 3, Charlie Chaplin, Mary Pickford, and Douglas Fairbanks. We covered the early history of all of them on this channel. Well, almost all of them. And that brings me to my top picks, and I'm going to go with a short film collection for this one, with Charlie Chaplin's Mutual Film Collection. There are few who wouldn't recognize Charlie Chaplin's classic tramp character. He's a staple of American cinema, and honestly, still a pretty popular Halloween costume. It was this character that allowed Chaplin to really rise to the top of the charts as the most popular actor in the world, the first actor contracted for $1 million, and one of the highest paid individuals in the world at that time. Not forever. London-born to music hall entertainers, Chaplin grew up in poverty, a common theme also seen in the story of Douglas Fairbanks and Mary Pickford. He never finished school and quit so he could pursue his true passion on stage. The first big break was in his meeting of his early mentor, Harry Arthur Saintsbury. If that name sounds familiar, it's because we've already covered him in the first Sherlock Holmes film video. Also, check that out. Chaplin played the small role of a newspaper boy in Jim, A Romance of Cockney. Chockney? How do you say it?
Cocaine.
Cocaine? No. That can't be right.
Cocaine.
We're gonna get a second opinion on that one.
Cockin.
Cockin? Okay, I give up. Anyways, he played Jim, A Romance of Cocaine, whatever, in 1903. Saintsbury cast Chaplin a second time, again as a newspaper boy, in his production of Sherlock Holmes. This very same play would be adapted into the film of the same name, starring the original Holmes, William Gillette. Again, check out the video on it. Chaplin's performance would be singled out, and he would eventually be called to London to perform the original play with Gillette. After that, Chaplin would be in and out of different productions, tours, and skit shows through the early years of his life before landing another big hit in April of 1910 with Jimmy the Fearless. This performance gave Chaplin considerable press attention, and he was invited to North America for a vaudeville circuit, where he invented this character called the inebriate swell, perhaps an early precursor to his tramp character. His performance would gain him the attention of Keystone Studios talent scouts, who signed him for a $150 per week contract and then just shipped him out to Los Angeles. His debut was in Making a Living, a movie Chaplin disliked, but critics instantly picked him out as this big talent. In his next performance, Chaplin got to pick out and design his own original costume. It was built to be this contradiction: baggy pants and a tight coat, big shoes and a small hat, and a little toothbrush mustache. You may recognize it as the iconic tramp. He would first film with this character in Mabel's Married Life, but he would actually debut at first in Kids Auto Races in Venice, which made it to distribution only 2 days earlier on September 7th, 1914. From there, the character exploded in popularity and became Chaplin's main on-screen persona. Chaplin often clashed with his directors, and he wanted more control over his own character. Director and co-star Mabel Normand even one time threatened to have Keystone release him from his contract due to them disagreeing. Instead, Chaplin was given the opportunity to direct his own film when he promised to pay $1,500 if it wasn't successful. That's a big gamble. Caught in the Rain became Chaplin's first directorial debut in May of 1914. Thereafter, he would direct every theatrical film he appeared in for Keystone, with exception to just one, the first ever U.S. feature comedy, Tilly's Punctured Romance, in November. Again, we have covered this film, so you are welcome to go check it out. This was also a big hit, so Chaplin's star was now rising, so he asked for $1,000 a week from Keystone producer Max Sennett. However, producer Max Sennett refused, so Chaplin kind of had to just switch teams over to S&A Studios. S&A out of Chicago was a bit more loose with their wallet and agreed to $1,200 a week. It was here he formed a team of regulars: Eric Campbell, Ben Turpin, Leo White, Bud Jameson, and Billy Armstrong. But most importantly, his leading lady, Edna Purviance, who would star in 35 films with Chaplin. Under his control, the Tramp transformed from this mean-spirited drunk to a hopeless romantic public nuisance. By 1915, the Tramp was a cultural phenomenon. And this brings us to 1917, with Chaplin accepting a contract from Mutual Films for $10,000 a week, making him one of the highest paid people in the US at that time. It was here at Mutual Studios that Chaplin would be in his prime and create some of his best short films of all time. The Floor Walker, The Rink, Vagabond, 1 a.m., The Pawn Shop, all these in 1916. And then in 1917, there was The Adventurer, The Immigrant, The Cure, and Easy Street. Although the entire series is worth watching, it's the 4 from 1917 that we're going to concentrate on today. It was in the Mutual films that Charlie was really trying to get a pulse on the culture of the time. He tackled topical elements into public consciousness, from immigration issues to alcoholism to crime. They were all still slapstick comedies at their core that made use of Chaplin's brand of wild energy, but they did manage to go a little deeper. First, we're going to look at The Immigrant, showing the struggles of people making their way to the United States in 1910. You have people packed onto ships, arriving to the site of the Statue of Liberty, and struggling to find employment or even their next meal. As depressing as that may sound, on the surface, it was all done in this jesting way. It had some genuinely creative comedic sequences, such as the dinner scene on the rocking boat, a set that tilts on its axis to send the single bowl rocking around the table. Another great scene revolves around the Tramp attempting to get this free meal and impress the girl from the boat, without getting, the stuffing beat out of him for the giant, played by Eric Campbell. All of it revolves around this clever, coin placement within the scene. You can really see how Chaplin was working on the Tramp's, softer side by him giving up money that he won in gambling to Edna's character, who he had a crush on. Or when he also tries to pay for her food before the only money he has slips through a hole in his pocket. Don't get me wrong, the Tramp is still a bothersome pest, but his hard edges have been smoothed over a little bit. Now, The Adventurer is a little bit more of a standard Tramp adventure. In this, he plays a escaped convict who is evading the police. Charlie Chaplin excelled in taking different, if similar, scenarios and putting new ideas on them without them ever feeling repetitive. The Tramp ducks and dives and finally, evades the police before finding a group of rich folk who keep accidentally, just throwing themselves off a dock into the water when they can't swim. So, great. So the Tramp rescues them and is invited into polite society, which goes about as well as you'd expect. He ends up forming a rivalry with the large man, again played by Eric Campbell, and you'll find that in many of these films, the Tramp is pitted against Campbell in this almost kind of Tom and Jerry type way. And it's all pretty fun with them trying to one-up one another, with the Tramp always getting the upper hand, either by, locking Campbell's head in a door or spraying him with water like a misbehaving cat. And so the Tramp has to kind of navigate upper society while avoiding discovery as the escaped convict, hoping to smuggle a few free drinks and maybe even steal a kiss from the girl. But alas, it all has to come to an end. The police arrive and engage in a high-energy chase through the house. This is probably Chaplin's most conventional film out of this set, but it's a good look at how well his formula worked, with the Tramp as this just bothersome but lovable buffoon. And the next film is The Cure. Chaplin had already tackled the topic of alcoholism in the previous year with the brilliantly simple 1 a.m., where he plays a drunk returning home and just trying to make it upstairs to bed while everything in his house becomes this obstacle. The Cure, likewise, covers the debate on the evils of alcohol before Prohibition. The Tramp, this time altered slightly as more of this rich fop, he arrives at a hydropathic hotel, whatever that is. As far as I can tell, it seems to be just some sort of mineral spring with, like a spa. Here he's an inebriate looking to dry out, but has, against the rules, smuggled an entire suitcase of booze into the establishment. When the hotel owner learns his employees have been getting drunk off his illicit supply, he orders the entire thing thrown out. This order is taken a little literally, and the alcohol is dumped into the cleansing spring, resulting in the entire hotel getting plastered. It's got a solid comedic concept at its core that really just on its surface level is pretty funny, while also having some added comedic value by being about a topical issue. You got funny sequences such as the tramp going for a massage, only for it to turn into a wrestling match where the enthusiastic masseuse is trying to bend his clients in half, which, that's pretty good stuff. And the last film we want to check out of this set is Easy Street, which is one of my favorite Chaplin shorts. Again, it's a high-concept comedic idea that even without dialogue, it's really easy to follow. Chaplin really doesn't rely much on intertitles, and is always pretty light with them, mostly using them to change the scenery or when clarification is absolutely necessary. Easy Street is a great example of this. The film is set on, go figure, Easy Street, which has become overrun with hooligans and miscreants. As a result, no one wants to be a cop, and so the station is trying to take just, anyone they can get, including someone who looks as untrustworthy as the tramp. At this point, the tramp is just looking to turn over a new leaf and repent from his old ways, but he's instantly suited up without any training and told to rid all of Easy Street of crime. The entire plot reminds me of the more recent Rango, a pretender that tries to live up to his own illusion. At the very beginning of the story, he manages to beat the meanest of the bunch, again, Eric Campbell, by using a street lamp against him. As a result, the rest of the outlaws are scared of the tramp as he struts around like the new sheriff in town. Unfortunately, he still is a little bit of a hopeless romantic and lets pretty women get away with crime. Of course. And the film does slow down for a moment to make a statement on crime and those who commit it, drawing a line between those who do it, just for themselves and selfishly, and those who do it out of desperation or to support a family. Anyways, the big man manages to make his escape from the station and basically beat up the entire force in order to seek out the tramp for revenge. Here, the tramp finally has to prove himself an actual hero and not just a fraud to the townfolk. He manages to beat Eric Campbell again, this time by dropping an iron stove on his head from, a second-story window, which is pretty convincing, actually. And as a result of his victory, Easy Street begins to clean up its act. The tramp gets the girl and becomes the local cop. It's actually a pretty clean, happy ending after all. For me, it's just one of Chaplin's best, from its simplicity to the strength of the central core concept, and the fact you really don't need any lengthy descriptions to really follow what's happening. It's very simple and straightforward. Overall, the Mutual Film Collection stands as this fantastic just template of what drew people to Charlie Chaplin's comedic style and to the character of the tramp. They were easy to follow misadventures with a fun character whose look told you everything you needed to know about him at first glance. He was a visual storyteller, and perhaps that's why he's remembered as one of the great contributors to the early days of cinema. And that's all I have for today. Please subscribe for more historical film flashbacks, future episodes, and modern movies. Thanks for watching, and please keep those reels turning. Thank you.